It really is amazing. I learned this yesterday, and I'm adding it to the workshop I teach because it's incredible. So some of you might hear this twice. I hope you hear it over and over and over and over, and I hope I do too. So we were looking up the program I administering for the Antioch Archdiocese is all about asking more questions and how you do it and what you're doing. And so we were curious, and we looked up how many questions did Jesus ask in the New Testament. There was 307. And then there was also a statistic that showed how many times he was asked a question by someone, because we know. By what authority do you do these things? What should we do with this money? Should we tithe or not? We know he was asked questions, right? He was asked 187 questions. He only answered 3 of them. How many questions do we answer? You're like, I know the answer to that one, right? Or I go, I know the question to respond with. Questions, since the fall of man, have been the way that God corrects us, the primary way. It's not that he never gives answers, but there's something in our fallen psychology that doesn't like to be told the answer. I know because I'm married, and I don't like when my wife tells me the answer. I like to find out on my own. And then 2 years later, I go, I figured it out. She goes, yep, I've been telling you for 2 years. Took me long enough, right? We don't like it, but neither one of us do. Men or women, any race, any culture, it doesn't, I mean, anywhere you go in the world, anywhere you go in the last 2,000 years, anything where you go before that, we don't like to be told the answer. We like to find it out on our own. That's the whole creation story. Adam and Eve didn't like the answer they were given by God, and they said, we're going to go find out for ourselves. And ever since then, God has used questions to deal with us. It was actually the first thing he said after the fall. We've fallen, and I always feel a little convicted when I hear this scripture. Adam, where are you? Does God not know where Adam is? Does he not know the answer? Jesus asked 307 questions. Did he not know the answer? There must be a different reason that he's asking questions. It can't be that he's not all-knowing. And that's what we need to embrace. We need to ask more questions. The next part we need to think about is, how interested are we really in other people? You know, one of the downfalls in marriages, one of the aspects you can talk about, is when they stop being interested in each other. And that you can cultivate it and you can abandon it. You can cultivate interest, genuine, authentic interest. I know that sounds hard to believe, but it really is something that you develop in you, you practice, you focus on, you make it important. Because this ties back to, if you've ever heard the phrase, hate the sin, not the sinner. And I know some people are like, what does that even mean? How do you do that? I said, well, there's very few people that hate themselves. But there's a lot of people that hate what they do. That's how you hate the sin. And do the same thing with people. Hate what they do, but never them. The way you don't hate yourself. Now, there's sometimes some people that do hate themselves. But that's rare. That's really not the problem. The number one problem is we love ourselves. Right? So we need to take that. We need to love others the way we love ourselves. Right? The way you love them is you listen. You can listen with interest or listen like you're waiting for them to finish. If you listen with interest, you're going to hear so many amazing stories. I was missing out on a lot of amazing stories before I used to listen more. I'm not even good at it. When I started this program, my wife will tell you I was the worst listener she knew. I've made a lot of progress. I'm glad I was. I can tell you that I started at the bottom. And my life has been so richly blessed by listening to people and learning so much about them and their story. It's easier to care about them. I know that sounds weird. It really is. When you get to know someone's story, you start to care about them in a different way. You can't get to know their story until you listen. So we need to listen in a way that we really care. We need to be quick to love and slow to fix. It's not that people don't need correcting. It's not that they don't need rebuking. But you have to prove you love them first. When a parent corrects their child, they were quick to love and slow to correct. They have to prove that I'm here correcting you because of how much I care about you. I heard it on a regular basis from my dad. It was probably one of the most important things he said to me on a regular basis. Every time he punished me, he goes, I want you to know I'm doing this because I love you. And I would go, yeah, right. But you know what? It stuck. It eventually did. He had to do it over and over and over. He was always quick to love. He was always quick to draw everything back to, this is from love. And because of that, it slowly fixed me. And I became an adult on my own way. So don't be so concerned and obsessed with fixing people. We need to respect people's free will the way God respects ours. It's amazing how much God respects your free will. He lets you do the dumbest things. He lets me do the dumbest things, right? And deal with the consequences. We want to really protect someone and we don't want them to do it. But in the end, you have to respect their free will. If someone hates God, they're angry with God, they don't believe in God, in the end, you have to respect their free will. It doesn't mean you ever have to stop loving them. God, it's amazing how He does this. He listens to you, He asks you questions. Right? That's how He respects your free will. This next part is something that I feel like we're losing in the world of technology. Technology is a beautiful thing. I believe we are sub-creators. He created this world and He wants us to sub-create beautiful things that glorifies Him, right? And technology is one of those things. It's done amazing things. But one of the things that I think technology, might be the source of this, is that we've lost the art of storytelling. We defend the Orthodox faith by saying that they maintained oral tradition. What does that even mean? They told stories. We maintain that we have icons because they tell stories. And when I realized that I couldn't take an icon and tell a story from it, that I was not living the Orthodox faith. That I can't go back and tell a story about this or that, or I've lost that art. Can I carry that old tradition of a story? How many stories did Jesus tell? Tons. Tons of stories. How many times do we revert to doctrine and dogma instead of a story? Way too much. I've made a very particular point. Unless I'm talking to someone that really wants to talk theology and doctrine, and that's fine when they do. Most people don't. If we're talking about attentive evangelism, we're talking about stories. Right? Learn the stories the way I did. Earlier I told you the story about Ananias and Paul. Learn how to tell the story without referencing the Bible. Not because it's bad, because it gets them jaded. If you say, I want to tell you a story from the Bible, they'll go, okay, go ahead. I'm ready. Right? And you're like, I want to tell you a story Jesus said. Hold on. I'm ready. Right? And so let me tell you about this guy that I learned about. I want to tell you his story. And it's a really cool story. You start just talking about it. Right? I saw everyone's interest earlier during coffee hour when I was telling the story about Ananias and Paul so differently. Because I showed how it relates to you right now. Right? And it's very easy to feel disconnected from Bible stories. It's very easy to feel disconnected from a saint story. Well, that was them and this is me. But tell the story. Learn storytelling. Stop arguing and have more conversations. People want to argue with you. They want to argue about the Orthodox faith. They want to argue about politics. They want to argue about gay marriage. Right now, the argument is self-identification in bathrooms. This will never stop. I promise you. There will be a new argument soon, and then another argument, and then another argument. It's how the devil divides. You can't have an argument without division. Right? It can't happen. You witness an argument, and you know you're witnessing two divided people. You witness a conversation, and it's completely different. And so you have to change your direction of your conversations. And it's better to not talk than to have the argument. It's even better to convert it to a conversation. See, what people don't like is they think in terms of like good and bad. You're telling me I'm bad. No, I'm thinking in terms of good, better, best. I'm thinking in terms of levels, right? I don't want to argue. If I can't argue, I'll keep my mouth shut. If I can have a conversation, we'll take it to that level. The Orthodox Church teaches it this way. You're not expected to be perfect all the time. We have levels. Sometimes I have a good Lent, sometimes I have a bad Lent, right? Some Sundays I'm doing all right. Some Sundays I'm like, I'm not sure I prayed that entire service. Right? And so think in those terms. Make that your goal. And don't feel bad when you fall short and at least you didn't have the argument. But we gotta stop having the arguments. We are known for arguments. We are known as a Christian people. I'm not talking about the Orthodox Church, but people see us as connected with every other Christian. Do you realize that? They don't know we're different. And as soon as you enter into an argument with them, they're never going to know you're different because you're acting just like every other Christian. We have to do away with the arguments. We have to get smarter and wiser. Innocent like the dove, wise like the serpent. What does that mean? Turn it around and ask more questions. The more questions you ask, the less arguments you're going to have. I promise. But avoid those arguments. One of the most sad and missing ingredients that we've seen in evangelism in America has not been the unwillingness to proclaim the gospel. I think we have it over here. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. There's two ways to say that. There's two ways. There's a prideful way that we talked about earlier, and being arrogant, and I'm right and you're wrong. And there's a humble way. It says, I'm not ashamed to admit that I need God. And that I need Him. And that I make a lot of mistakes. And the good news is that He's done everything that He needed to do to make sure that I would have a chance to spend eternity in paradise. Right? There's a humility lacking sometimes in the gospel, depending on how we say it. It's the same gospel. But are we preaching that gospel with arrogance, or are we preaching it with humility? When you talk about your need for it, it's something people are not going to argue with. They may not want to hear it, and you might have a little bit of time getting them to listen why you need it. But when you talk about it in terms of your story, I need this, and this is why, and this is what happened in my life, and I need it. I need God. Proclaim the gospel in a very humble way. Humility means, for those of you who don't know, I'm not telling you to lower yourself than where you are. Humility is an awareness of reality. Like I said, most people raise themselves up higher than what we really are. We think we're better than we really are, or nicer than we really are. I think I'm the most fun person to be around. Right? Am I? Humility is not about lowering you or raising you. It's bringing you back to awareness of reality. That's all it is. And it's very easy to disconnect with reality. It happens all the time. The last part of attentive evangelism, and then I will finish and we can do questions, is to replace comfortable and comforting. And they sound very similar. Sometimes during a church service, I am uncomfortable the entire time. But at that same time, the Holy Spirit is comforting me. It's not about how comfortable you are in your seat. It's not about my feet hurt. It's not about Jesus carrying that cross on His back after He had been whipped. He did that to comfort us, not make us comfortable. And if you will think about the people in your life that need to be comforted, not made comfortable. One way to make somebody comfortable is to enable them. They have a problem and you enable it. That's not comforting. You're making it worse. We know about enabling. We know it's a problem. And sometimes you might need a little bit of help and step back and say, hey, am I enabling this situation? Am I making them more comfortable, or am I comforting them? You might need help with that. But we have friends inside this church and outside this church that need to be comforted. They don't need you to make them comfortable. And that's the final piece of attentive evangelism. We talked about the gospel. We talked about how we preach the gospel. We talked about practical ways of asking questions, listening, caring. And as you just practice that list and you work through it, you'll start to see some incredible changes in your daily conversations. So do we have any questions? It's okay if you don't, because you might be like, oh, I got to think for a while. So if we don't have questions, I believe, are we wrapping up? Okay.
Yeah. Is it continue on the 10 minutes on the
Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, someone's going to go, and you want to do 10 minutes on that?
Okay, sure, yeah. So I would say, I really haven't cross-referenced this to know for sure, but Becoming Truly Human has a strong relationship with what I was just talking about attentive evangelism. But what kind of happened this is where I believe in miracles and a lack of coincidence. A miracle doesn't mean that it was coincidental. It means that God got an opportunity to work and do something special, and we don't always let him do that, right? And so I was studying evangelism, trying to learn all about it, had started my podcast, and was learning these things that were very different than what I thought it was. One of the first things I learned was Metropolitan Callisto's Ware. He was my first interview for my podcast. I don't know if you know that, which is a little daunting, but I wanted to start big. And in case you don't, if you never listened to him or know much about him, he's a very slow speaker. He's a very busy man. So that meant basically we had no time to prepare. We talked for about 30 to 60 seconds. Maybe, I'm not sure, but before the interview. I mean, I really didn't get the time to prep him. I didn't send him questions ahead of time. And it was my first interview, and I really didn't know what I was doing. The number one thing he wanted to talk about was that if we're going to really engage in this missionary mindset of evangelism and embrace who we are as the Orthodox Church, we have to become better listeners, not better talkers. I didn't ask him to say that. And that's what all of my research had been leaning to. And I was like, we're on the phone, and I've got my headset on, and I go, I'm so excited, because I had no idea what he was going to say. And he said, and he talked about an experience with a woman who taught him how to do confession when he was a priest, this old woman in his church. She said, you need to be a better listener. And he said she was right. And she taught him how to do confession. And from that point on, he learned how important it was that the people coming to confession felt listened to, not agreed with, not told it was, oh, it's okay, just listened to. Just that was the foundation of confession. That they felt like they had been heard in their repentance. They're repenting verbally to the church, and they want to know it's been heard. Right? And that was the number one thing he learned, is like listening is in every aspect of what I do as a clergyman. And so that's basically what we learned in the Becoming Truly Human program. We've done away with expectations. The goal is not in this program how many converts you're going to make, how many Orthodox you're going to convert. The goal is how many people did you give an opportunity to have a loving discussion about topics that matter. They can reject it, they can accept it, and that's it. At all times we respect their free will. There's no hidden agenda. There's no secret propaganda. There's no behind the doors, doors are closed, meetings about how we're going to manipulate them or gimmicks. None of that. We let go of all of it. And we said, we want to invite you to our homes to have a meal, watch a presentation, and then we're going to talk about it. And the technique of the discussion that we lead is what I train people on. That's what I spent all day yesterday in Whittier, California. We had 4 churches come together, and I was training them on this technique of the discussion group. And the technique takes all day to learn, because it takes a long time to learn how to be like God, right? Especially we haven't been acting like God in our evangelism. And we had crying yesterday. We had light bulbs going off left and right. And people saying, I've never heard this before. I've never heard to let go of the gimmicks, let go of the expectations, and just love these people. And let the Holy Spirit take over. Paul planted the seed, Apollos watered, and God caused the growth. We've known this from day one. And yet we still try to put our little spin on it. And so that's what the Becoming Truly Human program is about. It's roughly 8 to 10 weeks long. We guide you on how to have these discussions. You invite people into your homes. You have some fellowship together. Watch the presentation. It's a video presentation that's very inviting, very relatable. And then you talk about it. And that's it.
How do you get people to
You invite them. So far, we've had a lot of people try, and I told them not to advertise. And I said, just so you know, I think you're not going to have anybody come from that. But if you want to try it, you can. And at some point, they're going to start listening to me. I don't know when I say, now I'm not saying you can't advertise for other things. But for this, for some reason, they come because you invited them. And you said, hey, I went to the discussion group, we disagreed, I heard this, we were talking about this, and it was great. There was no arguing, there was no bickering, it was a real discussion. And I just felt like I don't get that enough in my life. And I liked it. And I just thought you might enjoy it too, and I was hoping you'd come and try it out. You just invite them. And we talk about how to invite in detail when you're coming to the workshop. And there's 6 of you. Yeah, we'll talk about how to invite people. And it has to be genuine and authentic. And the best invitations are when, I encourage churches to run this. I know that, does everybody here agree on everything? No, okay, good, okay. So what you do is, what I recommend is, if you can, you run this here. You guys go through it, you discuss, you find out what you disagree with. You gain a better understanding of each other, you still love each other, and you can walk away saying, I now know how to agree to disagree. And not walk away infuriated, not walk away angry, but walk away. You don't have to change your mind. You don't have to change your mind. You just have a better understanding. That's a rare opportunity in this world. And it feels so good when you participate in it. When they come and they experience it, most people really want that. They're craving that. Because you feel listened to. And a lot of people don't feel listened to. A lot of people. So that's how you invite them. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Can we just real quick, before everybody, again, God bless you, Subdeacon. This was a blessing and I think an enlightenment for all of us. I think it just really boosts and encourages us to learn from you, and then it's not only about orthodoxy, it's about love. And I think that's what the bottom line is about what you're preaching, is to touch that person no matter which way we do it. So we thank you for taking the time, and I'm sure everybody look forward to seeing you again. But also just want to thank Kenny very much for organizing this, and all he did a lot of work. God bless him. So it wasn't easy. And so you know,
community service hours for that.
you've got some bigger shoes to fill, Kenny, man. You got to keep going on this. So the first was wonderful. You got to keep topping it. So I don't think we can top Subdeacon. In front of him, we'll say that. But no, it was wonderful, and appreciate everybody spending the time and taking the time to be here, and because it does take a lot of time out of your Sunday and your day with your families. Thank you to all who brought food and helped organize and set up. So God bless you all. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's blinking saying, turn me off, turn me off. Video camera.